chocolate is yummy. And the world agrees. According to the market research firm Zion, the total value of the global chocolate market in 2017 was some $103 billion. And while no sane person should require an excuse to eat chocolate, nonetheless we continue to think them up. On Valentine's Day, February 14th, Americans will spend about $1.4 billion on candy and consume some 36 million heart-shaped boxes of chocolates. And while the dried and fermented seeds of the Theobroma cacao plant have been part of human cuisine and culture for as long as 5,000 years, the stuff that you find in a box of chocolates is a surprisingly recent invention. It is history that deserves to be remembered. Theobroma cacao is a small evergreen tree native to Mesoamerica. When pollinated, the seed of the cacao tree eventually forms a sheath around 20 inches long that hangs from the tree trunk. The pod will include some 30 to 40 brownish-red almond-shaped beans embedded in a sweet, viscous pulp. As the first uses by humans of the pods of the cacao tree dates back to prehistory, it's unclear where the human love affair with chocolate began. Ancient Olmec pots and vessels from around 1500 BC have been found, with traces of theobromine, a stimulant compound found in chocolate. But as the beans themselves have a bitter taste due to the alkaloids in them, it's possible that the Olmecs were consuming the sweet pulp and not the beans. That pulp may actually have been fermented, so that the first human use of cacao was as an alcoholic beverage. Again, it's not clear when the beans of the pod, which are dried and roasted to create cocoa beans, were first used by humans. Traces of brown powder containing theobromine have been found in Mayan pots dating to more than 1500 years ago. The so-called Dresden Codex, a Mayan manuscript from around the 13th century, describes cacao as being the food of the rain god, and the similarly dated Madrid Codex posits that the gods shed their blood on a cacao pod as part of its production. Those legends were the genesis of the scientific name for the cacao tree. Theobroma cacao is derived from Greek and roughly means food of the gods. Many of us in the modern world still find that description apt. But the Mayan use of cacao beans, which involved letting the beans ferment and then grinding them into a paste, was consumed as a drink. The paste was spiced and then combined with liquid to make a frothy drink. The first European encounters with the drink did not come until the 16th century, where it was seen in the Aztec court. The Aztec lands were not suitable for the cacao tree, and they may have specifically conquered Mayan lands in order to get cacao beans as tribute. In both cultures, the drink was apparently rare, and is only found in the sorts of vessels that suggest its use was confined to the wealthy. The drink, spiced with peppers, was a stimulant and thought to have aphrodisiac properties. The roasted beans were so rare that they were used as currency. But that drink was bitter, not sweet. In fact, the Spanish word for the drink, chocolate, was derived from the Aztec language and roughly translates as bitter drink. It understandably took some time for Europeans to embrace this bitter drink, which was mostly used as a medicinal for upset stomach, until Europeans started to sweeten it into something more like the hot chocolate we enjoy today, and its popularity rose. As processing cacao beans is a labor-intensive process, the growing popularity of the drink also drove a slave trade, as slaves were imported from West Africa to Mesoamerica to work the cacao plantations. By the 17th century, chocolate was popular throughout Europe, although it was expensive and generally limited to the wealthy. It was common enough in the colonies that rations for officers in the Continental Army included chocolate, and was regularly sold by settlers to the troops. At the time, it was considered to have energizing and nourishing properties, and was often mixed with wine, sugar, and flour to make something called wine chocolate. So in the as much as 5,000-year human history with the cacao plant, still all we were using chocolate for was to make chocolate drinks. I mean, seriously, no chocolate bits with chewy centers, no candy bars made of impossibly small squares, not even a chocolate chip? In 1764, an American doctor named James Baker came up with a way to press chocolate powder into what he called chocolate cake, but it wasn't like a chocolate bar or even anything like a chocolate cake. It was really just pressed chocolate powder that was broken up in order to make more chocolate drink. And by the way, if you've ever bought a product called Baker's Chocolate and you thought it got that name because it's chocolate that's made for baking, you're wrong. Baker's Chocolate got its name from the company that Dr. Baker started, and that brand name is now owned by Kraft Heinz. And while I like hot chocolate just as much as the next guy, I mean, come on, how long could it take to come up with an M&M? The breakthrough came in 1828 when a Dutch chocolatier named Caspars van Houten patented a hydraulic press that removed a large amount of the natural fat, called cocoa butter, that was in the nub of the cocoa bean. That created a cake that could be pulverized into chocolate powder. The initial idea was to create a product that could be more easily dissolved into liquid to make more chocolate drinks. Van Houten's son, Conrad, then developed a process that added alkaline salts, potassium or sodium bicarbonates, to the powder. This allowed the powder to dissolve more easily in water, but also reduced the alkaline taste, producing a milder taste. The process creates something called Dutch chocolate, and it is the basis of virtually every chocolate product today. If you like chocolate ice cream or chocolate cake, think of Van Houten. Chocolate is still sold today under the Van Houten brand. And as a possible service to humanity, Caspars van Houten neglected to renew the patent on his device. And so in 1838, the rest of the world got to experiment with all the wonderful possibilities that his invention allowed. It was the manufacturing developments of the Van Houtens and others that were said to have democratized chocolate from a treat of the wealthy to a favorite of the masses. Chocolate got a new improvement in 1847 thanks to the British chocolatiers J.S. Fry and Sons. The company had been the first to industrialize the process of chocolate making by patenting a process in 1897 that ground cocoa beans with a Watt steam engine. In 1847, the company developed a process whereby Dutch chocolate powder was combined with sugar and then had cocoa butter added back in, creating a malleable solid, the first mass-producible chocolate bar. In 1866, J.S. Fry and Sons created the first mass-produced filled chocolate bar, the chocolate cream bar, and in 1873 they produced the first chocolate Easter egg. Another British chocolatier, Cadbury Brothers, started producing a chocolate bar in 1849. By 1861, Cadbury was producing fancy chocolates in boxes. It was the Cadbury Brothers who had the brilliant idea of linking chocolates to Valentine's Day. The Christian feast day of St. Valentine has become associated with romantic love during the 14th century, when the concept of courtly love, a romanticized chivalric idea, flourished. By the 18th century, Britain had developed a tradition where couples expressed their love for each other by giving gifts on Valentine's Day. In 1868, Cadbury started producing fancy chocolates in boxes, shaped like a heart, forever linking the holiday with the food of the gods. In 1857, a Swiss chocolatier named Daniel Peter was working on a process to introduce milk to chocolate. Previously, powdered milk had been added, but the consistency was not smooth. Peter finally found success when he got help from his neighbor, Henri Nestle, who had developed a process for condensing milk to be used as infant formula. The result was the delight today known as milk chocolate. In 1879, the two formed the Nestle Corporation, which is today the largest food company in the world. In 1879, Swiss chocolatier Rudolf Lindt developed a conching machine. The mechanical stirring machine allowed an even distribution of cocoa butter and allowed unpleasant aromas in the chocolate to evaporate. By legend, Lindt discovered the process by accident when he accidentally left a mixing machine on overnight. The result was chocolate with a smoother texture, superior aroma, and better melting characteristics. Chocolate before conching had a somewhat gritty texture. In 2019, Lindt's revenues were some $4.3 billion. Surprisingly, one of the biggest names in chocolate, Milton Hershey, didn't start with chocolate. Hershey's first successful candy venture was making caramel. In 1886, Hershey founded the Lancaster Caramel Company of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. His caramel candies, made with fresh milk, were popular, and the company employed 1,300 workers by 1894. However, in 1893, Hershey shot chocolate-making machines at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Seeing opportunity, in 1894 he incorporated the Lancaster Caramel Company and created the Hershey Chocolate Company as a subsidiary. But deciding that caramel is just a fad, but chocolate is a permanent thing, he sold the Lancaster Caramel Company to the American Caramel Company and decided to focus on chocolate. In 1907, he introduced the iconic bite-sized chocolate candy known as the Hershey's Kiss. Ruth Wakefield, an innkeeper from Massachusetts, made her contribution to the world of chocolate in 1938. Wakefield and her husband owned an inn in Plymouth County, Massachusetts called the Toll House, where her home-cooked meals were famous. In 1938, she created a recipe that used broken-up pieces of a Nestle semi-sweet chocolate bar to create her famous Toll House Chocolate Crunch cookie. She gave Nestle the right to use her recipe in exchange for $1 and a lifetime supply of Nestle chocolate. Nestle then started making chocolate chips specifically for baking cookies, with Wakefield's recipe on the back. Today, an estimated 7 billion chocolate chip cookies are consumed in the United States annually, and Nestle produces about 250 million chocolate chips a day. In 1927, a former Hershey employee named Henry Burnett Reese invented another popular chocolate confection. Despite the advertising claim that a chocolate lover and a peanut butter lover bumped into each other, exclaiming, "You got your chocolate in my peanut butter, and you got your peanut butter in my chocolate," Reese actually developed the peanut butter cup because the cup part made mass production easier. The Reeses company merged with Hershey in 1963, and Reese's peanut butter cups are among the most popular confections in the United States. About 1.1 billion Reese's peanut butter cups were sold in the United States in 2013. One of Hershey's biggest competitors is Mars Incorporated, founded by Franklin Clarence Mars in 1911. Franklin's son Forrest went on to develop the popular Milky Way and Mars candy bars, but is perhaps most famous for the little chocolate candy with an M on it. Mars developed his candy-coated confection in 1940, but the drums of the Second World War were already beating, and it was clear that chocolate would be rationed. Mars made an agreement with Bruce Murray, the son of the then president of the Hershey Company. Murray signed a deal with Mars to provide some capital and the chocolate to make the new candy in exchange for a 20% partnership. The candy was popular with soldiers during the Second World War as it traveled well in all environments, so during the war, M&Ms for Mars and Murray were made under exclusive contract to the U.S. Armed Forces using Hershey chocolate. The supply in military rations made the candy very popular. After the war, they could again be sold to the general public, and Mars bought Murray out to sell the candy under the Mars brand. It is sometimes assumed that Mars stole the idea of M&Ms from the UK company Rowntree & Company, which produces the very similar Smarties candy. However, Forrest Mars was good friends with George Harris, a member of the board who had married into the Rowntree family, and the two had made a gentleman's agreement to not compete with their similar candies. That was relatively easy, as the right to the name Smarties is trademarked to another manufacturer in the United States, who makes a sugar candy called Smarties. Peanut M&Ms were introduced in 1954, despite the fact that Forrest Mars was allergic to peanuts. The industry still struggles with the sourcing for cocoa beans, with West African cocoa beans particularly being criticized for the use of child labor and the destruction of native forests. The issue has to do with complex problems in the sourcing chain, things like transparency, agricultural techniques, and poverty. Timothy McCoy of the World Cocoa Foundation was quoted in the 2018 issue of Raconteur magazine saying, "If the problem was simple, we would have solved it a long time ago and moved on. But in the end, it is up to we, the consumers, to hold the industry accountable." Over the years, many claims have been made about the health effects of chocolate, as the Guardian newspaper noted in 2018. Chocolate has been touted as a treatment for agitation, anemia, angina, and asthma. It's been said to awaken appetite and act as an aphrodisiac. You may have noticed that we're still just on the letter A. And while some of those turn-of-the-century health claims for chocolate seem ridiculous, you might recently have seen newspaper reports that suggested that research shows that chocolate prevents strokes. But unfortunately, The Guardian notes that such claims are overstated. Chocolate is, in fact, a high-calorie food that should be seen only as a treat. It includes some chemicals that can be harmful, for example, triggering migraines for some people. The Guardian quotes nutritionist Dr. Dwayne Muller, who said that chocolate is probably not healthy, but it's not harmful if it is enjoyed in sensible amounts. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy. Check out our community on thehistoryguideguild.locals.com, our webpage at thehistoryguy.com, and our merchandise at teespring.com, or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you have to do is subscribe.